The morning my mother walked into the kitchen and saw me with the man she slept with last night. The silence that followed my mother's voice was heavier than the smell of stale alcohol and the morning heat pressing through the window. Hannah stood there, her hand still gripping the doorframe for support, her eyes darting between the unbuttoned shirt of the man she'd brought home and my own disheveled state. The air in the kitchen felt like it had been sucked out of the room. Josh didn't move. He didn't try to hide or pull away immediately. He just stood there with a half-empty bottle of champagne in one hand, looking like a deer caught in high beams. "Chloe?" She whispered again, her voice cracking as the realization began to burn through the fog of her hangover. "What? What are you doing?" I couldn't look her in the eyes. I felt a strange mixture of paralyzing shame and a dark, twisted sense of triumph. For months, I had watched her fall apart, watched her bring home strangers to fill the holes my father had left in his wake, and for the first time, I had taken something back. I felt Josh's hand drop from my waist, the warmth leaving my skin as he took a tentative step toward the door. "Hannah, look, it's not what it looks like," Josh said, his voice gravelly and thick with the remnants of the night's party. It was the most clutch lie he could have told, and we all knew it. "Not what it looks like?" Hannah's voice rose an octave, trembling with a jagged edge of hysteria. "You were on top of her. In my kitchen. On the same counter where I make her lunch." She stepped into the room, her face twisting into a mask of pure agony. She looked at me, her eyes red-rimmed and desperate. "He's 30, Chloe. I brought him here. He was mine." "He wasn't yours, Mom," I snapped back, the words coming out sharper than I intended. The adrenaline was finally hitting my system. "He was just another guy from a bar. You didn't even know his last name until an hour ago. You don't get to claim people just because you're lonely." The slap didn't even hurt that much. It was the sound of it, a sharp, wet crack against my cheek, that made the world stop spinning. Hannah stared at her own hand as if it belonged to someone else. Josh took that moment to slide past her, grabbing his jacket from the back of a chair and making a run for the front door. We heard the heavy thud of the oak door slamming shut, leaving the two of us alone in the wreckage of the morning. Hannah collapsed into one of the kitchen chairs, burying her face in her hands. She started to sob, not the quiet, dignified weeping of a mother, but the guttural, ugly wails of a woman who had finally hit the bottom of a very deep well. I stood there, my face burning, watching her. I wanted to feel sorry for her. I wanted to go over and put my arm around her and tell her that we were both just breaking under the pressure of the divorce. But all I felt was cold. "You did this to hurt me," she choked out through her fingers. "You did this because your father left and you want to punish me for not being enough to make him stay." "I did it because he looked at me and actually saw me," I said, my voice dead and flat. "Which is more than you've done in 6 months. You've been so busy drowning yourself that you didn't notice I was drowning too." The weeks that followed were a slow-motion car crash. We lived in the same house, but we were ghosts. She stopped bringing men home, which was a relief, but she also stopped talking to me entirely. We communicated through post-it notes on the fridge. "Buy milk. Light bulb is out in the hall. Rent is due." It was a cold war fought in the silence of the hallway. I thought Josh was gone for good, a fleeting mistake fueled by champagne and rebellion. But a week later, I found him waiting for me outside my college campus. He looked sobered up, less like the handsome stranger from the bar and more like a man who was deeply confused by his own choices. He told me he couldn't stop thinking about the way I'd looked at him that morning. He told me he knew it was wrong, but he didn't care. And because I was 19 and hollowed out by a broken home, I went with him. We started seeing each other in secret. I would sneak out of the house while Hannah was asleep or passed out, meeting him in cheap motels or in the back of his truck. Every time he touched me, I felt a rush of power and guilt that was more addictive than any drug. I knew that if she found out, it would be the final blow to whatever was left of our family. But that was the point, wasn't it? I wanted to burn it all down so we could stop pretending there was anything left to save. Eventually, the secret became too heavy to carry. One night, I came home late, smelling of his cologne and the cigarettes he smoked. Hannah was sitting in the dark in the living room, a single lamp casting long, distorted shadows across the walls. She didn't look angry anymore. She just looked tired. "Is he worth it, Chloe?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. I didn't lie. I couldn't anymore. "I don't know," I said, leaning against the doorframe. "Maybe not. But he's mine now." She stood up slowly, her bones seeming to creak under the weight of her grief. She walked over to me, and for a second, I thought she might hit me again. Instead, she reached out and tucked a stray hair behind my ear. Her hand was shaking. "He's not yours," she said softly. "Men like that don't belong to anyone. They just pass through when the lights are dim. You'll learn that soon enough. I just wish you hadn't had to learn it from me." She walked past me and headed upstairs to her room. That was the last time we ever really talked about Josh. A month later, he stopped answering my texts. Just like she said, he vanished back into the neon lights of the bars he frequented, leaving nothing but a lingering scent and a bitter taste in my mouth. I'm 21 now. I moved out shortly after that night. My mother and I see each other for coffee once every few months. We talk about the weather, my classes, and the mundane details of our separate lives. We never mention the kitchen, the champagne, or the man who tore the final seam of our relationship. But every time I look at her, I see the reflection of the woman I'm afraid I'm becoming, and I realize that sometimes, the things we do to hurt the people we love end up leaving the deepest scars on ourselves.